I'm going to start the presentation now. Welcome. My name is Keith Ridgway. Just a little bit about me. I've been a member of the WIRSM for a number of years, and way back 40 years ago, I started as a risk, health and safety professional, and it's now my 30th year. I'm an environmentalist. It's okay, I'm just pressing. And an environmental sustainable expert and eco-friendly, and also CEO of incredible Husk and co-designer, inventor of BAMS AI. On the left, you can see the companies that I've worked with and for, some of the world leaders where I implemented 9014, all the normal standards. So who are Incredible Husk? Well, we're an R&D organization dedicated to developing natural, biodegradable and zero carbon footprint fiber material. In a nutshell, what we do is that we create binders, natural binders that can take any husk material. That is the husk around the shell that protects around rice, coffee, tea, and basically wherever husk is grown, we can actually convert it to an alternative material to replace unsustainable materials like plastics, bioplastics, wood, cardboard, and stone. Our mission is to support legislators, brands, manufacturers, consumers, and have a sustainable option, and to help decarbonize industries across the world and also slow down climate change. Our achievements to date is Green Water winners for environmental development and environmental sustainability. We're appointed Green World Ambassadors to cascade this across the world. We designed and developed an end-to-end earth-to-earth production process. In a nutshell, we can upload this production process anywhere across the world. We're located in UK, is the headquarters, Malaysia, Singapore, Hong Kong. And we have a range of products, and we fully tested to cook. So what is this all about? Well, and what I'm going to cover, how governments are responding to climate challenge, climate taxes, when will they start and how will they affect, what your organization can do to prepare, and the support and funding that is available from governments, such as R&D, grants. So why do we need change? Well, the UN's set targets in the IPCC report that if we don't act on it or delay, it will mean death and destruction across the planet. The impact of non-sustainable materials on the planet and the global population is just ever increasing with deforestation, carbon emissions, methane, damage to the ecosystem, and then even more so now is on people's health. So how are governments across the world responding? Well, they're coming out with new legislation, greenwashing regulations, border carbon tax. These are now starting to take effect across the EU. They haven't come to the UK and a lot of countries, but they will start. Plastic tax, banning of single-use plastics and product labeling. That's what I'm going to cover in the first section. So the UK, what is the UK Environmental Act 2021 and why do we need it? Well, it all comes from, i.e. we go back to that old word again, Brexit. When the UK left Europe, they had to bring in line and a new set of rules that protected nature, water cleanliness, clean, that actually came in line with the European directive. This act seeks to fill the gap and come in line with the EU's Green Deal that actually the UK signed up to back in 2018. the Act allows better and enshrines environmental protection in the law. And basically, it's there to bring new powers and better and protection of diversity. The part that really is hitting home in the Act is Schedule 12, which is the producer pays. This is aimed at manufacturers, retailers, and anybody else. You made the mess, now you clean it up. The Act established a new environmental watchdog called the OEP, the Office Environmental Protection, which will hold the government to account and public bodies. So what is the EU Green Deal? I don't know if anybody have actually seen this deal, but it actually sets out a number of sets, and one of them, the EU set, was to be net zero emissions by 2015. And they set a 50 to 55% reduction level from the 1990 levels by 2030. That means they said the levels in 1990, we reduce it by 50 to 50%. The actual UK have set a 60% limit. They actually then went on plastic tax, the first time this has come in. Then they wanted energy taxation. So again, it's all about really making sure that people act on this. If they don't, they'll get hit in the pocket. Carbon border tax. Now this will start to take effect from 2023, and emissions trading. And these are the carbon sort of certificates that documents will require. If you want to know any more about this, go to KPMG and they'll find it. So the next subject I'd like to talk about is greenwashing. What is it? Well, it's an ethical practice, and by which organizations actually tell lies. I hate using that word, but it is. They mislead customers in believing that their products, services, and it actually applies to services. And I hear the words like, you know, net zero, natural, wholly recyclable. And these words are not really telling the full truth. So the government, in line with the CMA, the Competition Marketing Authority, they set up what we call a green claims code that helps customers ensure their environmental claims are green. And the CMA have warned. They had until all organizations until the 31st of December 2021 to make sure those claims lived up to what they were saying. So what are the green claim codes? Be truthful, accurate, must be clear and not ambiguous, must not admit or hide critical information, must be fair and meaningful, and must consider the whole life cycle. That is from the raw materials coming out of the ground to the end of disposal, and must be sustainable. I've given you a little link to YouTube video. You can have a look at that and it'll give you a little bit more information. So border tax. These are the first EU really hard hitting. So it hasn't come into the UK yet, but it will come in force in 2023. And all 27, and even the UK, when they were part of Brexit, they actually stated, you know, yes, we'll agree. So they've come to an agreement that they have a rate of 80 cents per kilogram. When you consider back in 2016, it was only valued at £3 per tonne. Now the EU, obviously it rose to in 2021, the price per tonne for CO2 rose to £69 per tonne, and it was likely to increase year on year. So how will the border tax be charged? Well, they're looking at 4 options: customs duty, excise, shadow EST, and also EST obligation. These are importers must purchase allowance to cover their emissions. The other thing which is critical to this, if you don't want to pick up carbon taxes, is you need to make sure that your product has been calculated by an accredited organization. And this is where the carbon footprint comes in. So why calculate your organization's carbon foot? Well, first thing is to help the environment to reduce it. It also means that you be able to report the figures, and obviously it helps with marketing, and obviously it's for your branding. Reporting your footprint accurately is critical. Otherwise, it'd be classed as greenwashing. Contacting the Carbon Trust is a good place to start. So there are 3 types of carbon footprint. Organization carbon footprint. What is this? This includes all the energy used in the buildings, industrial processes, company vehicles, anything that functions. So they've done this so it applies to an organization that is a service. Product carbon footprint measures the greenhouse gases over the whole life cycle of a product, the goods and the services, from extractions of raw materials, the manufacturing, right through to its end final reuse and disposal. And then they're coming out with a supply chain carbon footprint. This is where it's really saying to the supply chain, hey, you need to calculate your carbon footprint from raw material to factory gates to end user to disposal. What is critical about this is you need to make sure your organization has the right LCA calculator. There are many calculators out there. Unfortunately, not all of them are approved. If you contact the Carbon Trust, they'll be able to help you again. But my choice is the LCA calculator by one click, who are UN approved. What does a product service LCA measure? Well, it really measures the carbon footprints, the total greenhouse gases emissions generated by a service, by the services and goods, from extraction of the material out of the ground to the end of the life, and what it takes to dispose of it. So there's a thing called cradle to grave, cradle to gate, and cradle to grave. The cradle to gate is business to business. The cradle to grave mostly used for business to consumer products. Again, it's critical that you make sure that the LCA calculator is by a credible company. So I just given you an example here of raw material, cradle to gate. So you measure, that's the manufacturer. And then the manufacturers will measure the disposable side, and then cradle to gate retailer and recycle. And then what you've got is final product is cradle to grave, cradle to grave. It's very important that this part is done by not just a competent company, but one that is approved. As I said, go to the Carbon Trust. They will be able to help you. Independent life cycle carbon certification. You may have had a number of standards or seen ISO and they sell obviously self-certified, or you can measure your emissions. Unfortunately, the only way you can make sure that people believe you is by an independent certification organization. The one we will use and are using is the Carbon Trust. They are the most recognized across the world. There are other organizations, but for me, it's important that they are the ones that I would recommend any company go into. So the Carbon Trust, obviously certified carbon foot labels. This is the label that we are going to use. So you can see the Carbon Trust certified, and it will actually state on the right-hand side, this product has been reduced by, and it will clearly state exactly how much you reduce, or if it is a zero, or in a lot of cases, negative. You can get negative. So the next thing I like to go on to is, if you like, anybody's got any questions, obviously, while I'm going through this, please, you can ask. Plastic and taxes. It takes 1 minute for a piece of plastic to go on the ocean, and then obviously it takes around about 300 years to dispose of certain plastic, sometimes even longer. So plastic and bioplastics takes a long time to degrade, and they leach toxins. Plastic and bioplastics cannot biodegrade without an industrial process. So if they go in the ocean, they may stay there depending on the type of plastic they are to decompose, and in landfill, anything from 450 to 1,000 years. When they are left to degrade by themselves, what you'll find, they leach chemicals. This is why when microplastics, when you have a red bucket and you leave it out in the sunshine, you'll start to see it changing color. Plastics, they leach toxins into food or drink they are contained in, which then make their way into the body. Again, you can go down onto, again, these are links so you can understand where this information is coming from. So it's not just made up, it's actually from recognized bodies. Plastic and climate, this is closely linked now. According to the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, plastic pollution disposal resulted in 850 million tons of greenhouse gases entering the atmosphere in 2019. If we don't do something about it by 2015, it'll go up to 2.8 billion and even more. So plastic can harm wildlife. I could go on for this for hours and hours, but I want you would have seen all this. Scientists have recently found that 100% of animals washed up on the British shores contain plastics within their stomachs. Every year, plastic kills 1 million seabirds and 100,000 sea mammals, turtles. I'm not going to go on too much about this, but you can see, and you may have seen on the TV, so I don't really need to speak more about that. But again, there is a link Our good site is keepbritaintidy.org. And this one is, again, it's touching home. This is Plastic Health Summit that took place in October 21st in Amsterdam and focused on environmental health and human health and the link between plastic pollution. Plastic affects health via three pathways. We eat, we drink, breathe microplastics every day. These small plastics may harm the health and they actually get into the body. Plastic products contain chemicals such as PAHs, polycyclohydromatic hydrocarbons. A number of these chemicals have been associated with serious health problems such as cancers, infertility, neurological developments, disorders like ADHD, HD, and autism. One of the things when microplastics end up in the environment, they attract microorganisms. These are harmful bacteria, and again, they increase, if they get into the body, they increase the risk of infection. This was interesting, you may have seen this. It was recently reported that surgeons, when they operated on 13 patients, 11 of them had microplastics lodged in their lungs. And obviously, scientists said microplastic pollution across the planet is being exposed at a level which is going to harm humans for years to come. What I'd like to do now is touch on the European Commission's single-use SUP. Now, this is, when this was set up, many, many years ago, the UK again was part of the EU, and they stated that the introductions of single-use items, and they targeted 10 of the most damaging, which I'll go through the list in a minute, and they wanted to rid these items by 2029. They really wanted manufacturers and sellers to be a major part of this and to clean up the waste and pollution they produce. This is why in Schedule 12, the producer pays principles of the UK Environmental Act, this is where it gets home to people and actions will be happening. The only thing is with this directive, they've allowed the European countries to pick and choose when they ban those 10 single most polluting plastics, single-use plastics. So, but they have to all be in place by 2029. So what are they? Well, cotton, bud sticks, cutlery, straws, stirs, balloon stirs, food containers, cup beverages. There's a list, but if you notice down the bottom, wet wipes and sanitary items. In the UK, these have not happened. There's a few that hasn't happened, but they will, because obviously the UK's directive is coming in line with the EU. What will the plastic tax cost? Articles 2 of the European directive states it's going to cost 80 cents per kilogram. So that's a considerable tax on a plastic product. The next new tax that the government brought in was the packaging tax. And they said in the 1st of April, just gone, the UK will implement a tax of £200 per metric ton on all plastics packaging components that do not contain at least 30% recycled materials. It's a start, and again, it doesn't matter if it's virgin plastic or recyclable plastic. If either go into the seas or the land, they don't biodegrade. So obviously the government decided we have to do something to start. So this is a good start. But over time, the tax will apply to all plastics, not just packaging. But what is important, it means that it's removing the plastic. How much does plastic contribute to the climate? As I said, I finish it off on this, and 850 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions in 2019. That's staggering. It's unsustainable. It really is unsustainable. So how can your organization help to prepare? So the first thing the organization needs to do is to do a life cycle cradle to grave process map. I'm going to show you examples of each of these, which we've done. Then do a material information flow analysis. This is how the material is moved right from taken out to the ground, right the way to the end of its life. And then supplier input, customer output, supply chain analysis, i.e., have you analyzed, you need to understand the supply chain mechanism, because you may be going across a number of borders, not realizing that you will be paying tax, carbon tax, plastic tax. So it's critical you understand who and what and where your supply chain starts and finish. Then one of the tools, obviously, to understand about what are the risks is a SWOT and PESTLE. Again, these are common tools that all businesses should be using. And then asset information risk and impact assessment. It is critical that an asset information is not a piece of paper. It's not, it can be a product, it can be an activity, but it's information. And it's very important that you carry out a risk and impact assessment on this, not just to check that, you know, how critical it is to you, but making sure that you have the right information. And when you have the right information, make sure that it's protected. Once from step 1 to step 5 has been completed, then carry out your carbon footprint life cycle analysis. Whatever you do, don't just do a life cycle and then just go, oh, well, we use 10 ton of lights are on for 8 hours a day, we drive X, Y, Z. No, make sure that you actually analyze the entire process. I know it takes a bit longer, but it is critical. Then step 7 is make sure you have a robust change management in place and consider the potential areas for change, the labeling, the cost of this alone, the communications and marketing messages that you send out. It's very important that you are not classed as greenwashing. It's really important because there are so many misinformation out there about the company, what they're doing. But when it comes to providing hard facts, they can't. They cannot provide. And it's so important that you, with your workforce, you provide education and upskilling workforce. A lot of the workforce that you have today may need reskilling in understanding about the carbon they're using, and carbon literacy groups that have been set up. Again, really good, really interested. And final step, and I would recommend that if you're really serious, that you consider carbon foot certification. Getting that certificate for your product is critical when you go to sell it. With the products, the product labeling, it will be like food labeling. Within 5 years, the customer will not just demand it, they will refuse to buy products that harm the environment. One of the most important things, embarking on R&D programs, and that's what this is, and to carry out the above and to find out climate-friendly solutions to the organization and manufacturing processes. There is help from the government, which at the end of the last part of this is talking about the R&D help and other assistance that the government can give. So what I'd like to do now is show you an example of what Incredible Husk has done. So Incredible Husk has used the BAMS. What is a BAMS? BAMS is a business assurance management system software. It does everything that and more, which a normal management system can actually implement. So let's have a look at what I was talking about, cradle to grave, life cycle process map. So what we have here is a typical Incredible Husk one. So from sowing, we check the soil. Harvesting, we check again. Collecting of the husk, we check again. Test for contaminants, we check again. Making the raw materials, again, we have sensors in place so we don't get cross-contamination. And then we can actually take our material into an injection or a compression product. Then it goes to an eco lifestyle, tables, cutlery, leather equipment, you name it. The fascinating about our product, when it comes to the end of its life, we crush it up and it becomes an organic fertilizer. Not just compost oil, it's a fertilizer. Again, at each of these stages, it's been certified, it's been verified by independent people. So the first thing that we use is a BAMS asset risk assessment impact tool. What I've got here is not showing ours, but you can see every step: service failure, health and safety, environmental, statutory risk, comment, and each of these will have a score. And depending on the score that has been set, then action is taken. Again, these have got special codes built into them. Then from there, we produce a BAMS SIPCO-FMEA risk control. What you can see here is soil management, accidental or deliberately cross-contaminated, and then we have risk parameter factors like this one has CPI, CPK, CPP, and we controlled by a laboratory standard 1725. So before we started the process with no controls in, we would have scored 490. Our risk number, if you want to call it, is set at 60. So we try to go below everything. So you can see that's why it's gone into green. Again, at each step and sub-step, we make sure that we are checking and double checking the information that we get. Then we come to the standard, the BAM's Incredible Top Management Commitment. And these are all in line with standard ISO, and you can see that obviously the development that we put in, the inputs, the outputs. Sorry about that. Yeah, then obviously the Incredible Health Process Map. So what we have is the inputs into our main system. So I use within Incredible Husk, I use an APQP, Advanced Production Quality Planning. People in the automotive industry, they would understand this. And what we are trying to do is within the yellow boxes is the waste. That's what we're trying to eliminate. And again, we have output. So standard, plan, do, check, act. And people, this is not new. This is not new to a lot of people. This is quite modern as well. This is a MIFA, and this is showing you from the soil, husk collection, transportation, raw material. Then we come to the green box recipe. And we go all the way through, coming through, and then we go collection, transportation, crushing, and there is our organic fertilizer. Very simple. Incredible Husk AI. This is all the sensors we have in place to monitor what we are doing, when we are doing at each of the steps. And traceability and assurance. So at each step from crop, it's been monitored, what we're doing, when we're doing it. And I said about communications and marketing messages. Very simple way is a matrix. And you can see that Incredible Husk, IHIG stands for Incredible International Group, ECO, and you can see straight away that we're all green. And we are competing and we are showing all other unsustainable materials. And again, we are making claims, complete life cycle organic fertilizer, biodegrades under natural conditions in 90 days, no compromising quality, EU, and with certified food, no toxin chemicals, PHA, PLA, carbon negative life cycle. That is our material. Why is that? Because we use crops that farmers burn. It's the waste. When it goes as an organic fertilizer, it then grows new life, new plant. So obviously it takes the CO2 out of the atmosphere. And we have a couple of other elements here. And BAMS, what is it? Just a quick one here. It is a RICS compliant assurance management systems auditing software. For an organization to survive and improve, it will depend on its ability to control risk and maintain compliance, have an effective governance over their critical information assets. I've focused on 27001 on this, and obviously I've looked at people's information, process information, plant information, product information. The BAMS AI virtual auditing, it will audit those critical elements without any human intervention. And it does save time and effort. Now what I like to do is hand you over to Jay, who's going to help you with and provide you information on R&D relief, and also if you want information on how the banks can help you, our partners NatWest Bank, they will be able to provide you information, but if you contact me, I can pass you on to them. That's me finished. So if you have any questions, so I'm now going to hand you over to Jay. I know it's a lot to take in and a lot to cover, but I could spend the next umpteen hours, but I wouldn't think you would like to listen to my Welsh sound tones. So that's me over to you, Jay.
Okay. Keith, have you got my slides integrated into yours?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, wonderful. And I guess today just wanted to give a very brief flavor of R&D tax credits, and if you have any questions afterwards, I'd be more than happy to take them, more than happy to have a discussion afterwards as well. So that's not a problem. Today is going to be a very whistle-stop tour as to what R&D tax credits are. And obviously there's a lot more details, there's a lot more nuances within the process. But today, hopefully it'll give you a flavor of what R&D is for, specifically for tax purposes. So just to, Keith, if we go to the next slide, just to give you a very brief introduction about myself and our team. So within our team at Assets, I work alongside someone called Stuart Bentley, who's the director of R&D tax across the central region. Now, he's been doing R&D for a number of years, and he has a bit of a background in material sciences and technology and a PhD in manufacturing engineering. Myself, I've got experience within industry. I started predominantly within the automotive industry, and most of my career, so for the past 10, 12 years, must have been within material cost reduction engineering, looking at how can I create efficiencies, how can we look to get various different materials in place, how can we look to redesign or enhance processes in order to make something more cost effective or better than it already is at the moment, and whilst at the same time providing a customer with the same experience. So that's a little bit of background on ourselves. And next, I just want to jump straight into R&D for tax purposes. So I guess the headline of R&D for tax purposes is that R&D takes place when a project seeks an advancement in a field of science or technology. And that's a very broad statement. So it can involve a variety of different things. I just wanted to give you a flavor of some of those things that it could involve. So Keith, if we could just go forward. So what does it look like? You could have new product development, something that's never existed before, and it's not just a new product that it needs to be. So the guidelines actually say that it can be a new product, it can be new knowledge, it can be a new device, it can be a new service, it can be a new process. So all of those things, as long as you're doing something innovative that's not existed before, it can qualify for R&D in some way, shape or form. Keith, if we just go next, appreciable enhancements. So this is another component that we look at. So within industry, a lot of things already exist. Now, as a lot of you are, I imagine, are competent professionals working in a field, if you are looking to enhance a product beyond its current status, you may be looking to see, oh, how can I amend this, adjust it? How can I add a new feature to it which it doesn't exist? Or how can I actually take an item which does exist on the market and evolve it to do something that it's not intended to? So these are appreciable enhancements, and often they take a lot of brain scratching, figuring out where am I going to get a solution from, and a lot of times you have to revisit the drawing board, you have to test the item until you get some sort of solution. And Keith, the next. So next we've got about developing cost and process efficiencies. This is another aspect which we look into. And within this, as I mentioned, I used to work with a lot of suppliers. I used to work for a number of different OEMs, and I used to work very closely with suppliers to see, okay, what are we doing at the moment? How can we change some of the materials? How can we change some of the design to make it more effective? Can we make it better, cheaper, quicker in any way possible? So these are some of the kind of qualifying activities. There may be more in there. I mean, if you want to, if you're unsure of what may be qualifying, or if it's something that's related to your business, again, as I mentioned, more than happy to have a chat. So Keith, let's go to our next slide. So in terms of cost, there's a number of different, I've called them cost buckets because it makes it easier. So how do we quantify the activity that was done? Obviously, the first thing is people are going to be involved. So we take an apportionment of people's salaries and any national insurance contributions, any pension contributions, and any sort of bonuses, salaries, and things like that that have been paid to individuals within the company working on the R&D activity are qualifying expenditure. The second cost category is subcontractors and externally provided workers. So these might be agency workers, they might be people that you've given a bit of work to and said, oh, I can't really figure out a solution for this element of this R&D. Can you give me a solution? And then you integrate into your system, etc. So subcontractors or externally provided workers is what EPW is. Consumables, now these are traditionally materials that are used up in R&D activities, so things that you've purchased, you've consumed and used up in the R&D activity. Typically, they're not sold on for money's worth. However, you do get special cases where, for example, if I was to build a nuclear submarine, it may be the first off, and I'm probably not going to build another one. In those kind of circumstances, we'd be looking at first in class and various of the attributes that surround the building of that kind of thing. Next cost bucket that we're going to have a look at is utilities. So this sort of covers utility bills, I guess. When somebody's working within an environment, there's costs incurred for them to be working within that environment. So utility costs are covered. However, rent isn't. So if rent contributes towards part of your utility cost, it's probably not qualifying expenditure. The last is software. We see a lot of companies who are undergoing design processes, iterative design process, making modifications, changes in order to package various things, in order to create something which is going to be suitable for a certain environment. In many cases, you might be doing some finite element testing, you might be doing stress testing, you might be doing some modeling of some sort. So various software which is associated with the R&D activity is qualifying expenditure. Now, the last thing that I wanted to mention is in terms of what does it actually look like? What number am I going to get? How much money am I going to get back from HMRC? Now, R&D for tax purposes is a corporation tax relief. So in terms of money, it reduces your tax bill, or you can get a refund, or you can create losses which can get carried forward within your business. Now, that's always on an individual basis, and we can discuss that and what it looks like for your business. In terms of actual monetary value, you're typically looking at around 24 pence in every pound spent to get back. It can increase, it can decrease slightly. It just depends on the position of your company, what kind of R&D activity you're doing. In some cases, it might be less if you're part of a larger group. There may be other factors. If you're getting grant funding, that's something that we'd have to look at. So today, specifically, what I've talked to you about is only the R&D elements from if you're a small or medium-sized business. Under the guidelines, the definition of small or medium business is slightly different to what would be classed as a bigger company. And even for bigger companies, we can claim, so that's not a problem. It's a slightly different process. In terms of other innovation grants and funding, there is stuff available out there, and we'd be happy to talk to you about this. We'd be happy to discuss some of the programs that we've been involved with clients on in terms of things like Innovate UK. Now, getting grant funding doesn't mean that it stops you from getting R&D tax relief as well. So it's always something to consider. If you're getting some sort of grant funding to help you out with projects on the outset, this is a retrospective claim. So once you've carried out the work, once your financial year has finished, then we can look at putting a claim together for you. And Keith, I think we're on to our last slide, which is just our contact details. So there's Stuart, who's the Director of R&D across the Midlands, and there's myself, Jay, who's the R&D Tax Manager across the Midlands region. If you have, as I said, if you have any questions or you want to have a bit more of a discussion about your business, what you do, how we can help you, more than happy to help.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you for that. So, any questions? And finally, obviously, if you like to visit the Incredible Husk website or you want some more information, contact myself on any of the issues I've spoken about and download the brochure. And there's a few handouts, as you can see, but any information at all obviously on the R&D, because we're 100% R&D and we obviously working on multinational in Singapore and Malaysia. So over to you now. Any questions there, please?
Thank you for that, Keith and Jay. It was really informative. Just to remind everyone, if you do have any questions, you can ask those using the chat function, which is on the right-hand side of your screen, and we can take a couple of minutes now to go through those. But if you equally need some time to digest the information as well, then as Keith said, you can download the handout, which contains a copy of the slides and some other resources as well. And you can get in touch with Jay and Keith outside of this also. But yeah, from my own sort of, I guess, personal perspective, Keith, I thought the information around greenwashing and the impact not only on wildlife, which I think is quite widely discussed now, and you know, there's been various TV programs and articles and things about that, but also on the health of individuals. I think that was quite eye-opening for me, really. And also the interaction between the different risks. So also you've got the environmental side, which is obviously very crucial to all of this, but also the impact on supply chains and other areas of the business as well. So yeah, it was really interesting, very informative, and lots of information that you've been able to get through to us there.
Yeah, the most important thing was bringing Jay in, because what restricts companies is finance. And with the help that the government are giving now to companies, a lot of that work can be done, because as long as they understand what is an R&D and what it comes under R&D, and as long as they do that right at the start, as I said, I think that's the critical part, and speak to the professionals is really important. Greenwashing, yes. Unfortunately, already the survey that was done, the first surveys by the CMA, found that 40% of the companies they reviewed were all greenwashing. And as I keep on saying to people, it may say bamboo on the label of something, but it's not actually bamboo. It's got a percentage of bamboo in. And again, that's greenwashing. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think Keith, just on one of the points that you mentioned about companies being scared of the finance element, it is true, and the finance element does stop a lot of people from going ahead and going through with sort of the R&D commitment, as it were. And just to give you a bit of an idea, the government has roadmapped for the next 3 years to have about £50 billion for innovative ideas. That includes any kinds of grant funding, which happens at the outset, so people can apply nice and early. And at the back end, there's a lot of money for the R&D as well. So there is underclaiming going on within society at large. It's just not everybody is aware that they're able to sort of go ahead and claim money for the activity, which may or may not yield a good result for them.
Okay, so I'm just having a look to see if we've got any questions. We haven't had any questions come through, so we will leave it there. As I say, I think probably everyone's going to go away now and have a look at the handout and digest perhaps some of the information in there before they get in contact with you with their questions. And for those of you who have joined us today, we will also be placing a copy of this webinar on our YouTube channel. So if you'd like to recap at any point, you are able to do that also. So Keith, Jay, thank you very much for sharing your knowledge with us today. As I say, it was really, really useful, very informative, and very detailed. Thank you to everyone who's joined us and participated in this webinar. We'll leave it there. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.